After nearly a decade on First Take, Molly Qerim walked out, blindsiding ESPN and igniting a power struggle Stephen A. Smith doesn't want you to see. Molly Qerim's shocking exit from ESPN wasn't just another TV shakeup. It was a nuclear bomb dropped on one of the most iconic shows in sports media. After nearly a decade as the face and heartbeat of First Take, Molly abruptly resigned in September 2025, and fans were blindsided. What triggered her sudden departure? A brutal breakdown in contract negotiations that spilled into the public before she could control the narrative. One moment, she was moderating fiery debates between Stephen A. Smith and the biggest names in sports. The next, she was gone without warning. No farewell tour, no emotional send-off. This wasn't just a career change, as it was an emergency exit. Behind the scenes, sources say ESPN and Molly were miles apart on money, respect, and her future with the network. And once those failed negotiations leaked, the trust shattered instantly. Molly's choice to walk away immediately instead of finishing her contract sent a powerful message, one ESPN didn't see coming. But here's the real question. What was happening behind closed doors that pushed a decade-long partnership to the breaking point? Because once you hear the power struggles and betrayal at play, this story gets even more explosive. When Molly Qerim said goodbye to First Take, it wasn't just what she said that stunned viewers. It was what she didn't say. In her farewell message, she thanked the fans, the crew, and the show itself, but never once mentioned Stephen A. Smith by name. After nearly a decade sitting side by side, building one of the most successful shows in sports media, that silence was deafening, and it wasn't lost on insiders, who immediately flagged it as a major red flag that something far deeper than contract drama was simmering beneath the surface. Think about it. When Shannon Sharpe left Undisputed, he spent minutes publicly thanking Skip Bayless. That's standard practice, but Molly, nothing. Not even a passing nod to the man she shared the stage with for 10 years. That omission spoke volumes and fueled speculation of a fractured relationship that had gone far beyond business. Whispers from inside ESPN say the tension between Molly and Stephen A. had been boiling for months, maybe even years, and her farewell silence was her final message to him, loud and clear. But what exactly happened between them behind the cameras? Because the next piece of this puzzle exposes just how deep the betrayal really went. The numbers behind this story are jaw-dropping, and they reveal just how lopsided the power dynamic on First Take really was. While Molly Qerim was anchoring ESPN's flagship morning show, moderating fiery debates, and keeping egos in check, she was reportedly earning around $500,000 a year. That might sound like a solid salary, until you realize Stephen A. Smith, sitting right next to her every single day, was raking in over $20 million annually. That's a 40-to-1 pay gap on the same show, built on their shared chemistry and on-air success. And it didn't stop there. Molly was also watching other ESPN personalities, some not even hosting daily programs, pull in far more money. Imagine pouring a decade of your life into one of sports media's biggest shows, only to find yourself treated as replaceable background noise. That pay disparity wasn't just insulting, it was a message about how ESPN valued her role. It's no wonder Molly wanted more money, more recognition, and more opportunities. But ESPN's answer? Stay where you are, or walk away. The real kicker? That wasn't the only imbalance, because Stephen A.'s power over Molly's future stretched far beyond salary, and that is where this story turns even darker. Molly Qerim wasn't just asking for a bigger paycheck, she was fighting for evolution. After nearly a decade steering First Take to the top of sports television, she wanted what any top-tier talent would: career growth, creative control, and a platform of her own. Insiders say she proposed following the same path Max Kellerman did, transitioning from panel to hosting her own show. It was a natural next step, backed by years of proven success and audience trust. But ESPN didn't see it that way. Instead of rewarding her loyalty and leadership, the network slammed the door shut. No major raise, no new opportunities, no recognition of the empire she helped build. The message was crystal clear: accept the status quo or step aside. That ultimatum turned what could have been a smooth renegotiation into an irreparable fracture. And here's where the tension reached a breaking point, because Molly wasn't just negotiating with a network. She was up against one of the most powerful figures in sports media, a man whose influence behind the scenes could make or break careers. And that man was Stephen A. Smith. What role did he really play in shutting down her future? The answer will change how you see this entire story. Here's the part most fans never knew. Stephen A. Smith wasn't just Molly Qerim's co-host on First Take, he was also her boss. As the show's executive producer, Stephen A. wielded wielded enormous influence over personnel decisions, salary budgets, and the overall direction of the program. This wasn't just his catchphrase when he called First Take my show. It was a statement of fact. His signature could greenlight careers or quietly end them. Industry insiders have long whispered that Stephen A's approval is the golden ticket at ESPN. When he signs off on you, doors swing open. When he doesn't, they slam shut. That dynamic has shaped the exits of personalities like Max Kellerman, Carrie Champion, and even Shannon Sharp, all of whom left under clouds, suggesting they didn't have Stephen A's full support. Now imagine negotiating your future while sitting across from the very person who has the power to decide it, and who also benefits from keeping your salary lower. That's the reality Molly was up against. But the real drama ignited when another network stepped into the picture with a life-changing offer, and ESPN's response pushed everything past the point of no return. Here's where the entire situation blew wide open. As Molly Qerim fought ESPN for fair pay and career growth, Fox Sports swooped in with a game-changing offer. A deal reportedly worth $2 million per year plus bonuses. That's nearly 4 times what she was making on First Take. It wasn't just a raise, it was validation. It proved that the industry saw her value even if ESPN didn't. For Molly, this was a pivotal moment. She wasn't asking to match Stephen A. Smith's $20 million salary, and she was simply asking for compensation that reflected her decade of success and her role in one of sports media's most watched shows. But ESPN stood firm. No major raise, no expanded platform, just the same offer that had already driven her to the negotiating table in the first place. That refusal sent a clear message. They didn't see her as essential, and that, more than anything, made her decision to walk away inevitable. But what happened next is where this story turns from frustrating to downright explosives, and because Stephen A. Smith didn't stay silent, he started talking, and what he said lit a firestorm that may have destroyed their relationship for good. What Stephen A. Smith said after Molly Qerim's departure sent shockwaves through the sports media world. Not because of what he revealed, but because of how he said it. On air, he struck a somber tone, calling Molly a friend and colleague, but quickly shifted gears with a statement that many interpreted as a direct shot. He warned that everyone answers to somebody and cautioned against overvaluing yourself in contract negotiations. Remarks that came just days after Molly walked away from First Take, feeling undervalued and disrespected. Even though Stephen A. repeatedly insisted he wasn't talking about Molly, the timing, tone, and subtext told a different story. To industry insiders, it sounded like he was publicly scolding his former co-host, implying that she had gotten too big for her role and paid the price. It wasn't just commentary, it was a narrative shift, painting Molly as the problem. Fans and fellow media personalities were quick to call out the hypocrisy, noting how Stephen A. had once fought tooth and nail for his own worth. And that hypocrisy is the key to understanding what comes next, because once you see Stephen A.'s own contract history, everything he said about Molly starts to fall apart. The backlash against Stephen A. Smith was swift and fierce, because his comments about Molly overvaluing herself rang hollow coming from a man with his history. This is the same Stephen A. who, during his own 2024 contract negotiations, publicly demanded $25 million per year, compared himself to NFL quarterbacks like Dak Prescott, and unapologetically declared, "I know what I'm worth." He didn't whisper those demands behind closed doors. He blasted them across podcasts, interviews, and national TV, turning his negotiations into a media spectacle. And this wasn't his first clash over money and ego. Back in 2008, Stephen A. famously lost his job at ESPN after overvaluing himself in contract talks, later admitting his ego had gotten in the way of smart decisions. In other words, he's done exactly what he accused Molly of, and far more aggressively. That's why critics called his recent lecture hypocritical and self-serving. It wasn't about humility, it was about control. And the deeper you dig, the worse it looks. Because Stephen A. didn't just fail to protect Molly publicly, he may have actively shaped the narrative against her, and other voices in the industry are calling him out for it. The criticism of Stephen A. Smith reached a boiling point when fellow analysts and media insiders, led by Emmanuel Acho, called him out for what they saw as a betrayal of trust. Acho didn't hold back, accusing Stephen A. of revealing unnecessary details about Molly Qerim's exit to boost views and drive clicks, rather than protecting the colleague who helped build his media empire. After a decade working side by side, Acho argued Stephen A. owed Molly more loyalty, and certainly more discretion, than cryptic comments about her abrupt resignation and overvaluing herself. "What are you doing?" Acho asked on his Speakeasy podcast. "Protect her at all costs." He pointed out that Stephen A. had no problem turning his own contract drama into content, yet suddenly acted like Molly's situation was too sensitive, while still hinting at behind-the-scenes tension. Even worse, Acho questioned whether Stephen A. prioritized headlines over humanity, saying, "Get clicks at the cost of LeBron James, fine, but not at the cost of someone who helped you build your empire." And that's the heart of this controversy, and because what started as a contract dispute is now being seen as something far more personal. And the next chapter exposes just how deep that betrayal may run. This entire saga has done more than just end a decade-long partnership. It's pulled back the curtain on ESPN's power dynamics and exposed one of the most blatant double standards sports media has ever seen. Stephen A. Smith built his empire on bold, aggressive contract tactics, publicly demanding massive paydays, walking away from deals, even clashing with executives when he felt undervalued. It's how he turned himself into a $20 million a year brand. Yet when Molly Qerim tried to do the same thing on a far smaller scale, he criticized her for overvaluing herself and forgetting everyone answers to somebody. That hypocrisy didn't go unnoticed. Fans, analysts, and industry insiders all pointed out the glaring contradiction. Stephen A. celebrates himself for knowing his worth, but scolds Molly for asserting hers. And that double standard reveals a deeper truth about power in sports media, one where influence often outweighs fairness, and loyalty is expendable when egos are on the line. But this story isn't over. Molly's next move could change the entire media landscape, and Stephen A.'s legacy might never be the same. If you think this was explosive, wait until you see what happens next. Click on the video on your screen to dive into the next chapter of this unfolding media war.